Before we talk about your planning reform proposals, I'd just like to get your reaction to what Stellantis have said overnight. They effectively want the UK government to renegotiate its Brexit deal.
Well, I do think that we need a better deal than the one that we've got. I do think there are other things that we need to do as well. Supply side chains, etc., need to be improved. So there's a lot of things, but is the Brexit deal we've got working well? No, it isn't. And we need to improve on that. And that's part of our plan to make Brexit work.
So you will actually be looking to renegotiate the Brexit deal with the EU?
Yes, we want a closer trading relationship. I think there's more work we can do with the EU on science and innovation. I also think there's more we can do in the security space as well. So I think there are real improvements to be made to the EU deal. I don't think many people look at that deal and think it's working very well. We promised an oven-ready deal, and we got something which was frankly half-baked. So there's a lot of work to do there, as there is on everything else, to improve on that, clear up the mess, and then power our economy forward, because if there's one thing that has been significantly bad over the last 13 years or so, it's our growth rate. Our economy hasn't grown at the rate that we need it to grow, and that's why I've said that an incoming Labour government, if we're privileged enough to be voted in, will have as a central mission economic growth, highest sustained growth in the G7, and that needs to be felt in living standards rising across the whole of the country.
Now, the UK's trade performance has deteriorated pretty badly since Brexit. Would you be open to going as far as rejoining the EU single market?
No, I don't think we should rejoin either the EU generally or the single market. But I do think that we should break down barriers. If you look at car manufacturing is obviously in the news today. We've been a very good car manufacturer for many, many years. We've been good because the way that we've put manufacturing together has been all of the parts that are needed for the car coming in as seamlessly as possible, arriving at the assembly point at just the right time so that cars can then be built, turned around and out of the warehouse as quickly as possible. That's a model of manufacturing that has worked. It has been impeded by the EU deal that we've got, and that's why we need to improve on the deal. I do think we can do other things as well, though. I mean, some of those parts I think we should be making in the UK, so we're not constantly bringing them in over borders. So all of this has to ladder up to a very strong, comprehensive plan to grow the economy.
Well, let's talk about what you're looking to do with the planning regime. As I understand it, you are essentially looking to loosen planning regulations.
Yes, we want to build more houses. As you will know, many people watching this will know, the aspiration, the dream of owning your own home is very real. Not least because for working people it provides security that they desperately need. And that has been killed effectively by the government because whereas we had targets for house building until the tail end of last year, those targets have been taken down. That means now the blockers are in charge and house building will drop probably to its lowest level since the Second World War. So what I want to set out today is what an incoming Labour government, again, if we're privileged enough to be elected in, will do about that. Partly that's about putting those targets back up, but that on its own I don't think will do enough. We need to get to grips with the planning framework because at the moment it's those that own the land and developers who essentially choose how many houses and where they're going to be. I think we're going to drive house building at pace. We need to put local areas in charge of that, so change the planning rules, have development corporations as vehicles on the ground to drive building and make sure that the dream, the aspiration of owning your own home is realised for so many people who at the moment have had their dreams shattered. And I know, when I was growing up, my dad was a tool maker working in a factory. My mum was a nurse. We didn't have a lot of money, and sometimes we struggled with our bills, but we did have our own house with a mortgage. And that sense of security. So I never feared as a child that we wouldn't have a roof over our head, our own roof over our head. And that's the sort of security that goes alongside that aspiration to own your own home.
Now, you've said in the recent past you want to give communities more say over developments in their area. What if these communities don't want to have their local green belt concreted over?
Well, on the basic principle that local areas should have a greater say. I think that's really important because at the moment, as I say, landowners and developers tend to choose where houses are put. And that often leads to a conflict with local communities. Whereas if local authorities, local areas had more of a say, I think it would actually reduce those local conflicts. You asked me about the Green Belt. Of course we want to protect our countryside. When we went on holiday when I was a child, we went to the Lake District. I know the countryside is rich is to be protected. But we are going to have to make tough choices. And there are parts of the Green Belt where we build now. And I think there are better choices to be made. And the example I'd give, just to bring my argument alive, if you like, is that there's been a housing development in the southeast of England where the choice for the housing development was a playing field or a car park. The car park was technically in the Green Belt and so protected. And so the playing field, which was technically outside the Green Belt, was chosen for the building. So we've ended up with a car park being protected and a playing field being used to build houses. I just think that we've got to make different choices. So this is not about disrespecting the need to protect the Green Belt and the countryside. Of course we've got to do that, but we've got to make tough choices about, and if you let local areas decide, I'm pretty sure they would say, look, if we had the choice, we'd have put those houses up on the car park and saved the playing field. That's common sense, and it will drive house building, and that is also part of our plan for rebuilding the economy, because for every 100,000 houses that we can build across the United Kingdom, then broadly speaking, that's 1% of GDP that goes up. That's desperately, desperately needed just at the moment.
You're also talking about ending the moratorium on onshore wind farms in England. What sort of veto will communities have if they don't want these things on their doorstep?
Well, communities have to have a say, but at the moment the system is tilted so that if only a few people object, it takes years to get anything done. And what we're saying about planning on housing applies, frankly, equally to other business sectors, whether it's wind farms, the laboratories we desperately need, the warehouses we need. All of the planning is taking far, far too long. I asked one of the energy CEOs, if we were in government, how long would it take you to build a wind farm? And he said to me, about 2 years. I said, well, why then does it take 13 years or so now before anything actually happens? And he said, well, it's 2 years to build, it's about 5 years for the planning, and then the grid, which needs to connect to the wind farm, doesn't really crawl towards the wind farm until the wind farm is finished, and you end up with 13 years. That's far too long, and businesses across the country express their frustrations time and again that the whole thing takes too long. And that holds us back because other countries are much more streamlined. They've changed their rules and they're winning the race for the next generation of jobs. We have to take the tough decisions to turn that around so that, when the question is asked, which nation is going to lead on wind turbines, which nation is going to lead on hydrogen, the answer is why not Britain?
Now, staying with energy, the Unite Union, which is your biggest financial backer, has called today for the renationalisation of the entire UK energy industry. Is that something you're going to consider?
Well, we have considered it and decided that it isn't the right step. And I'll tell you for why. We looked at it the summer before last when energy prices, as you know, went through the roof. And there was this question, well, wouldn't it be better then to bring them into some sort of public ownership? And I looked at it with my team and I said, well, how much would it cost us to do it? And then the crucial question, if we did it, would that reduce the prices, which is obviously the thing that's pressing on people at the moment? And the answer to that is no, because even if you nationalised, brought it into public ownership, energy companies still have to buy on the global market. And that's why we did consider it and in the end rejected it as not actually answering the central question, which is how do you drive down those energy prices? And I think there are better things that we can do.
Did it in France, and it did bring down energy prices.
Well, I think it depends on the configuration as to whether it's linked to the producers of the oil and gas or renewables in the first place. But the other things I think we can do is we can rush towards renewables. We do believe that there should be a publicly owned vehicle for that, so that as we go towards renewables, we want GB Energy, a publicly owned company, to be the vehicle for ensuring that the proceeds of that come back to the British taxpayer and are used, to help bring those bills down. So I'm not, ideologically opposed to something that's in public hands. In fact, we're proposing GB Energy, but that's to yield the future work that we want to do. There are other things, by the way. I'm very, very keen on the idea that we properly insulate our homes. If we'd been doing that for the last 5, 6, 7 years, then millions of homes would have very cheap bills. I've seen this, you've probably seen it yourself, in places like Yorkshire, where you go to one of the homes that's been stripped out, insulated properly, and I went there, the people living there were beaming from ear to ear on a freezing February morning because their house was warm, their bills were very, very low, and that ought to be not just what we expect of new houses, but what we expect to be retrofitted to existing houses, because in the long run, what we do with energy bills, we need to keep them down. There's been price freezes in place. They're very expensive things to do, but we've got to fix the fundamentals, if you like, at the same time.
Okay. Before I let you go, you've obviously been on a great mission to rekindle relationships with businesses. Every CEO I know has met either you or Rachel Reeves over the last year or so. Can you carry your party with you on that? Because you've even been talking to private equity executives, which are, for a lot of your party, a sort of folk devil almost.
Yeah, we've spoken to no end of CEOs, and I've changed my party, and my party now is fully signed up to this. We know that to grow the economy, we have to partner with business. And when I say we're pro-business, what I mean by that is that we recognise that business is a force for good, that the next generation of jobs, secure jobs, and output for this country is with a active, dynamic government, if you like, sleeves rolled up, working alongside businesses. And that's why the discussions we've had with CEOs has not been just a cup of coffee, get to know you. It's also been about how do we work together in government. And that's why Rachel and I have met so many CEOs. We went to Davos, as you may have seen, to speak directly to investors and to ask, what's the inhibitor? Why aren't you investing in the UK in the way that we think you should? And a large part of their answer was because we haven't got the stability, we haven't got the partnership that we need from the government at the moment, and I'm determined that we'll turn that around. And just as I've turned around my party, we want to turn around the country so that we can drive forward to what I'm absolutely convinced will be a better future.